So to formally inaugurate the conference, I would now like to invite on our digital stage to introduce and throw light on the essence of this web conference. We are more than happy and delighted to have Professor David Rooney with us. So if you can hear me, I hereby request you to kindly switch on your webcam so that we all can see you. Good evening, sir.
Good evening. How are you, Ashwati?
Sir, I'm very well. Thank you so much for asking. First of all, I would really like to thank you for joining us. I know it's an odd time there. You're joining us from Australia. So I extend my gratitude to you. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
So I would like to give our audience a brief introduction about you. David Rooney is Honorary Professor of Management and Organisation Studies at Macquarie Business School, Macquarie University in Sydney, Australia. He has researched, taught, and published widely in the areas of wisdom, leadership, the knowledge-based economy, and creative industries. Thank you so much, sir, and the stage is all yours now.
Great, thank you very much, and also thank you to Maya for the beautiful flute playing that commenced proceedings today. So good morning or good afternoon or good evening to everybody, depending on whereabouts you are in the world. It's almost midnight here, so it's morning in my part of the world. And welcome to day 2 of the conference. And I'd like to just thank the conference organisers and Jagannath Sanyal in particular for inviting me to the conference to speak, and I regard it as a particular honour to be in such eminent company and with people from all around the world. So I'm going to talk a bit about discipline and practice today, and this comes out of my research, which very much focuses on wisdom in relation to how do you develop wisdom, and how does wisdom also apply in fields like leadership. And I guess, you know, everyone's talking about the COVID-19 pandemic at the moment, and I guess one of the things that's showing us is that so many political leaders around the world have demonstrated to us that in a moment of, you know, I don't think it's an exaggeration to call it an existential crisis, that they're simply not fit for leadership. And I think that's a great failing of the world, that we put these people in positions of leadership when they really shouldn't be there. And I guess it's kind of my life's work to help remedy that situation. So I'm going to talk about a lot of really pretty practical things today, but there's a lot of theory, there's a lot of research, and there's a lot of philosophy underlying it all. And my work in philosophical terms is influenced equally by European and Indian philosophy. So if people have questions at that level when I'm finished, feel free to ask me those sorts of questions. Now, when I talk about wisdom, I'm talking about what Aristotle would have called practical wisdom, which is wisdom as you express it, as you go about your everyday life, as a family member, but perhaps also as a leader. And to be able to do that, you have to embody the wisdom that you've learned. So you have to be able to actually act bodily in the world in ways that we might deduce as being wise. And I think it's this embodied part of wisdom that's really missing, and where practice and discipline can come in and help as an antidote to the kind of problems we're facing today. And so I guess my question for today is, how do you become wise? And this is also influenced by decades of teaching where I try to instill wisdom in students, and where I've thought very carefully about what are simple, effective ways that any teacher or any guide or any mentor could employ to help either themselves or other people move along the path towards wisdom. And so I'm not saying that it's possible for everyone to become as wise as Nelson Mandela or Mahatma Gandhi or Mother Teresa or other great figures in the world, but we can all move along the path towards wisdom. We can all be a little bit wiser, at least, than we are today. So let me start talking about discipline and practice. So one of the interesting things about both those words in the English language is that they both have multiple meanings, and so they're both two-sided concepts, and they're also both concepts that are two sides of the same coin. So one can be disciplined through practice, and practice can be a discipline. And both aspects of all spiritual, or both of these aspects of discipline and practice exist in all spiritual and wisdom traditions around the world. And also historically, they've existed in education, and I'm not sure that they still do today in quite the way that they were meant to be. And I guess, so one can practice something as in practicing the flute. One can practice something as in practicing yoga. But one can also practice as not as a training device, but as an actual profession. So we might have a practice as an accountant or a doctor or a dentist. And a discipline can be both as well. So we can work in a discipline. So I work in the discipline of management, for example. But I'm also a marathon runner, so I have to be disciplined to make sure that I go out and do my practice runs every day so that I can be fit enough. And so these are all really important parts of becoming wise, even if they're a bit old-fashioned. Now, there's an interesting theoretical field in psychology based on what's called deliberate practice theory, and I want to just talk a little bit about that because it's a nice way of beginning to think about how you practice and how you become disciplined. So in deliberate practice theory, the idea is that you practice something over and over in a disciplined way to become excellent at it. So you might become an excellent chess player, or you might become an excellent musician, or an excellent philosopher, or an excellent parent. It really doesn't matter. If you're going to become really excellent at something, then you've got a lot of work to do in terms of practice, and you have to approach it in a disciplined way. You not only have to approach your practice in a disciplined way, but the way in which you use what you've learned in life. And you might have, many people might have heard of the concept of 10,000 hours. So it takes 10,000 hours to develop that kind of expertise. Now, in my view, 10,000 hours is a rather arbitrary figure, but that's what the deliberate practice psychologists say it takes. And it might in reality take more, it might in reality take less. It doesn't really matter, but 10,000 hours is a big number, and it's telling you that you've got to be very dedicated. But part of it also is, people might have heard the saying, perfect practice makes perfect. Now, so you don't just practice, but you practice getting it right. And you do that in the presence of a trusted person, a trusted expert who gives you honest and accurate feedback. So we could call this person a coach, we could call them a mentor, we could call them a guide, it really doesn't matter. But there's someone there who's helping you all along. So if we take that approach seriously and say that this applies to becoming wise, then you're not doing it on your own. You've got someone there to help you. Perhaps we can call them your guru. Now, I want to just also talk a little bit about wisdom. And wisdom can be two things as well. It can either be a contemplative practice, and in ancient Greek philosophy, they might call it contemplative or theoretical wisdom, and it had the name Sophia. So if you have a friend called Sophia, the name translated from Greek literally means wisdom. But then there's also the idea of practical wisdom, which is being wise as you go about your life, caught up in the trials and tribulations of everyday life, dealing with the lack of resources, dealing with the political games other people are playing, and dealing with, you know, being a son or a daughter or a mother or a father, a person who's embedded in a community, and all the distractions that might bring to your focus in what you want to achieve. So wisdom includes a state of mind. It includes a cooperative process of becoming wise. And it also involves individual physical activity. So the extent to which you as a person on a path, developing a wise practice, so how do you actually embody wisdom, or can you in fact embody wisdom in your activity, in your life? Now, that all can sound very intimidating. But as a teacher, I've decided that, you know, really to give people an opportunity to come along this path, you've got to give them a simple process and a clear, easy starting point. So the starting point for me, which I use with my students, particularly students studying corporate social responsibility, is to look at values and virtues in particular. So a virtue is a positive value. So values can be positive or they can be negative. Okay, so they can, and if they're negative, they're probably selfish or destructive. So when I talk about values today, I'm really talking about virtuous things. And what I do with my students is there are 4 core questions that I want them to answer. And by the way, if I was doing a corporate leadership development process, I would ask them the same 4 questions. So those questions are, who are you? That's question number 1. Number 2 is, what do you stand for? In other words, what are your core values? Where are you going in life is the 3rd question. And the last question is, how are you going to get there, having defined where you're going? Now, what I find is that those are actually very difficult questions for almost everyone to answer. And there are reasons for that. One is it's really difficult to actually identify who exactly you really are, what your core essential identity is. And many neuroscientists today would actually argue, well, there is actually no such thing, and that no such thing as a core and essential enduring self, and which echoes the attitude that Buddhists have to the self. And perhaps also in Hindu philosophy to the sense of there being the one or the unity. It's not actually personal self. So we have to do a bit of work. So I ask students, first of all, to sit and think about, well, what really are my core values? What kind of person am I, and what kind of values would that person have? And that's a difficult task, and I'll give them a lot of resources to refer to that will speak about, or what are theories of values and virtues and ethics and morality that might help. I might give them a list of all sorts of different values and virtues that they could choose as being appropriate to them. But then I say to them, look, there's a difference between what you've written down, which we would call your espoused values. So these are your aspirationals. These are the values that you aspire to. But there's another kind of values. There's another kind of values called values in action. And we measure values in action by deducing what your behaviour in the world says your values are likely to be. And so there's an online questionnaire that students can do. So if you just Google values in action inventory, I think, or just values in action survey or questionnaire, you'll find it. And then they fill out the questionnaire and it gives them another set of values. And these are their values in action. So then the next step in the process is to say to students, well, what are the differences between your espoused values or your aspirational values and your values in action, and why might those differences exist? And then after reflecting on that, we'll reevaluate what each student's core values are. And then I give them a challenge. And in psychology, that's called, we call this a behavioural experiment. Experiment is really the wrong word. It's more like a trial, a real life trial. And so I say, design a behavioural experiment that will honour one or more of your core virtues. Something that you are going to do out in the world for the next 2 weeks that will honour your core values, your virtues. And in 2 weeks' time, we'll get together and we'll review how well you were able to put those values into action. And I want you to keep a diary every day to record, what successes and failures you had. And typically in Australia, a group of students, a lot of them will decide that one of the core values that they should adopt is vegetarianism. And because we eat a lot of meat in Australia, and what we inevitably find is that as undergraduate students, they might go out on Friday night, have a great time, and they're going home at 1 o'clock in the morning, and they happen to go past McDonald's. And so they go in and have a Big Mac without thinking, and then suddenly realise that they've broken their behavioural experiment to be a vegetarian for 2 weeks. And so that gives us an opportunity to work with ethical or moral failure, if you like, and figure out, well, how do you come back from that? How do you deal with that kind of failure without saying, look, I'm a complete failure, this is not a success, I'm abandoning the experiment, and I'm not going to therefore have the opportunity to make that kind of behaviour a habit in my life. So what we're working towards in these behavioural experiments is developing the habits of being wise in the world. So we can set endless numbers of behavioural experiments for ourselves or for the people we're coaching or mentoring. And it's actually a very easy way to enter onto this pathway towards wisdom. I don't want to say too much more. I'm going to pick up more on this in the panel discussion later on, where I'll tell you some more steps. But for the moment, I just want to make some really important points about this discipline practice process to becoming wise. And that is, the path is a long and winding one, but there is a place to start from. And it's a very simple place. And we can just call it doing behavioural experiments around our core values. The next key point is that wisdom is demanding and hard to achieve. So it's going to take time. You're not going to become wise by going to a 3-day workshop. You're not going to go to a 3-day workshop and then wake up the next morning and you'll be wise. No, it's a lifetime commitment. The stepping stones towards that wisdom, though, are not hard to understand, and they're not hard to design a process, a disciplined process of becoming. The difficulty is at sticking at it and not giving up when you fail. And if we think about what I began with, that we may not all become supremely wise people, but we can all become wiser than we are today, then practical wisdom, the wisdom of everyday life, is actually something that's achievable for everyone. So just to finish, I hope this short presentation sets you in a good mind space for engaging with the program today, and I hope it also helps to link what happened yesterday and the discussions yesterday to today. And I thank you all very much for your kind attention.
Thank you so much, sir.